Thanks everyone for coming along and listening to me talk today. Really appreciate it. My name, as Alison said, is Ben Andrew. I am the RSPB's picture researcher. That's my job title. And I'll talk to you. I'm going to talk in two parts. First part of my talk will be a bit about RSPB, my work at the organisation, and a focus on kind of our image library and our sort of photography area. And the second part of my talk will be about my own wildlife photography. So quite a lot of images to get through. Hopefully you don't mind that. Just a brief bit about myself, first of all. This is how you would often find me on an average day taking photos. I absolutely love British wildlife. And would do anything I can within certain means to get kind of the perfect shot that I'm after, even if it means getting water level for a banded demoiselle in my local river, or donning a pair of chest waders to photograph frogs up close with their spawn in a pond, and sometimes even getting a little bit too close to something like a hornet's nest to photograph the hornets going in and out. But yeah, generally speaking, I just absolutely love British wildlife. I love getting out with my camera. It's been a passion of mine. British wildlife has been a passion of mine for years and years and years. And hopefully, you'll enjoy seeing some of my photos later. But this is where I work. It's the wonderful RSPB headquarters, the Lodge in Sandy in Bedfordshire. On one of the most beautiful days, obviously, a few years ago when we had some snow at the Lodge. It's a wonderful mixture of gardens, woodlands, and also beautiful heathland, which looks amazing in the summertime and when all the heather's in purple and in flower. So it's a wonderful place to work. My role at the RSPB, I do a bit of photography for the RSPB. So I do a bit to do with taking photos of our reserves. I do some conservation kind of photography, so taking photos of our staff, kind of doing practical conservation on reserves and with species. I photograph some events for the RSPB as well, and I also do occasionally get to photograph some wildlife for the organisation as well, as and when that allows. But my main role at the RSPB is not to do photography. We do have an actual staff photographer now, but I've been sort of filling in that role for many years. So for many years we had a photographer, then we didn't. I kind of filled in and did a bit of both, and then we've now got another staff photographer on the book. So, but my main role is picture researcher, as I explained. So I look after our photo library. And I also kind of do photo research for lots of different reasons. So the magazine, big signs on reserves, lots of other kind of pieces of marketing materials and things like that. I basically look for the right image, for the right piece of communication for the RSPB. So it does what it says. I'm a picture researcher. And that's what I do. But, overall, I'm kind of overseeing most of the RSPB's kind of photography department. The RSPB has always been a visual organisation, and this can all be, brought back all the way to that very first charity Christmas card, where the RSPB recognised, using pictures and using, something visual on the front of a Christmas card could be used to sell. Could be used to raise money and raise funds for the charity. So I think the RSPB, one of the first charities, or one of the only charities back in the day to a kind of produce a charity Christmas card. And then going on from there, clearly we've carried on becoming a very visual organisation, and Birds magazine, our kind of membership magazine, was always one of those kind of visually led products that we kind of led with. It was very important that the front cover of the magazine was a stunning picture of a bird. So Birds magazine, for many years, it was a kind of a really sought after thing for a kind of a photographer to have their image on the front of our magazine, and photographers really kind of vied for that position. And then obviously the magazine itself had a big design team where lots of staff spent lots of time kind of choosing imagery, and selecting the right pictures for the double page spreads and for the front cover and other pieces of marketing materials as well. So the RSPB has always been very visually led, very focused on photography, and always known how to use photography to kind of like, inspire people to fall in love with nature and, contribute to the RSPB, volunteer for us, that kind of thing. We've consistently had an in-house photographic unit. So we've, from the sort of 1960s onwards, the RSPB has had a photography department, and we've always had an in-house photographer as well. Some of you may recognise Chris Gomersall. He was our in-house photographer. In the early 80s, he was responsible for he was given the task of sorting out, I suppose, the RSPB's in-house photo collection. So he's not only our staff photographer for many years, but he was tasked with, with the kind of people in the higher up than him sort of said, we've got all of these assets, we've got all of these photos, we need to know what to do with them, we need to kind of group them together, and we need to produce a kind of in-house photo collection. And Chris was actually responsible for convincing those bosses that we should have something more than just grouping them together and collecting them together into an archive. We should have our own kind of stock library, because stock libraries were still forming back in those days. But so he recognised that we had something potentially great on our hands, which was a natural history stock library. And so that's exactly what happened. So in the mid to late 90s, the name RSPB Images was adopted, and transparencies were mounted and sorted. And Chris was given the task of identifying the first few hundred most important images for high resolution scanning. And they became the sort of nucleus of the RSPB Images digital library. So these were all photos that were taken in-house by RSPB staff, RSPB volunteers, or professional photographers who used to sort of kind of sell their work to us. So Chris identified that we should not only collect all up what we've got, but then we should potentially have a photographic kind of stock library that had contributing photographers. So RSPB Images was born. This is the new logo, obviously, but back in the day, the RSPB Images was born in the early 90s, and then a core group of kind of professional photographers then became contributors to this library, going out, taking photos for the RSPB and sending their best work into the collection to be kind of sold and used by the RSPB. And the RSPB Images then had its own website, and it was the first digital photo agency with its own website in 1998. So it's quite groundbreaking stuff, really. Then, and pushing the boundaries, and as a natural history kind of photo library, it was the first. So it's got some great history with it. Essentially, RSPB Images became the go-to place for a bird on a stick. If you were in need of a photo of a bird on a stick, that's where you came to. You came to RSPB Images. We were known for being bird focused, bird centric, bird heavy in terms of a library. And the early days of bird photography, a lot of it was focused on getting a lovely bird on a lovely stick. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's exactly what RSPB kind of Images was known for. And so we were, the art library was selling hundreds and hundreds of images to sort of magazines and other charities sometimes and things like that, all focused around birds and bird photography. And we obviously had some of the best bird photographers in the UK contributing. And it was pretty one-dimensional, I suppose, at that point, but it was exactly what was needed. It was exactly the sort of style that we were going for. If we fast forward to now, we represent just over 60 professional wildlife and landscape photographers most of them in the UK, but we've got a few photographers who live and work abroad as well. We've got 250,000 digital images on RSPB Images, and we upload 5,000 new images bi-monthly. So 6 times a year we're uploading 5,000 images. So we're uploading about 30,000 new images a year. to RSPB Images, and these are still they're a mixture now of professional photographers contributing their work, and also in-house photography, so staff and volunteers still very much contribute to the library as well. So as Alison said, I contribute to the library. I'm not one of our professional photographers that contributes. I contribute from a staff member point of view. So I go out in my free time, I take wildlife photos, and I let the RSPB use them. I let our volunteers, our local groups, our staff use them. So they've got an image that they don't have to pay for, they don't have to kind of worry about finding. And I let my kind of colleagues and anybody else who represents the RSPB use them. We've got a broad mix of wildlife photographers and landscape photographers. They come from all over the country. They all do a mixture of different things. They all bring their own kind of different styles. Some of them shoot in black and white. Some of them shoot kind of very much still scientific kind of natural history photography. Some of them are very artistic. But that's the whole point of the library. We've got a broad suite of photographers, all doing slightly different things, and that's exactly what we need. We need, someone who can fly a drone. We need somebody who lives up in Scotland. We need somebody who lives down in Cornwall, somebody in Wales, etc., etc. So that's what we've got with RSPB Images. We've got this great range of contributing photographers, and the way the library works is simple. They submit images to me. I go through their work in something called an edit. I decide which images we want to take onto the library. We then go through their images, make sure they're all sharp and the colors correct. We check for any kind of dust spots or anything like that. We check their captions and their keywords are all correct, and then we upload their images to the library. RSPB Images then acts like an agent for them. So we sell their imagery to other organizations, and we split the money with them. And any sales we make, we split the money with the photographers. So, in their photos are raising money for the RSPB. Their photos are bringing in money for conservation. And obviously they're helping to earn money for their livelihoods, and so they can pay their bills and carry on living and working as professional photographers. They also let us use their photos at a discounted rate. So we still pay for their photos to be used, but we're paying less than we would if we had to go out and find those images from elsewhere. And obviously the library, as I said, we also have our own in-house pictures as well that we don't have to pay for. So, as a charity, we recognise that we don't have endless amounts of budgets for photography, but we do have budget for photography. We do have budget for imagery, because obviously it's all about using the right images for the right jobs. And sometimes you should be paying, a professional photographer for a really outstanding, brilliant photo. So these photographers, they do that for us, and we brief them as well. So we tell them, what kind of style we're looking for. We tell them, and we give them a list of species every year that we feel like we're lacking in. If something's moved onto the red list, for example, if a species is moved onto the red list from the amber list, we might say, look, we need more photos of swifts, for example, or stone curlews. And hopefully these photographers, some of them will listen to our feedback and will go out and capture that sort of thing for us. So they kind of, it's great. It's like having an army of wildlife photographers out there working for us, but they're free to come and go and free to do what they want, free to send their pictures in or not send their pictures in. It's up to them. And it's great. We can pick and choose what we want. In terms of, with 250,000 images and years of operating, the big questions always are for a lot of these photographers is, do we still need another puffin, sitting with sand eels in its beak, or do we still need another snowy squirrel, or do we still need a kingfisher on a no fishing sign, or a goldfinch on a beautiful perch, or anything like that? Do we need any more birds on sticks, for example, or anything like that? The question I always go back to them is, yes, we always do, because people always need to see a new photo. People want to see new photography, and we as an organisation, our designers and people like that, don't want to keep using the same pictures over and over again. So there is no image that we really don't want anymore. Even if we've got 500, 1,000, 2,000 pictures of puffins, for example, we still want our photographers to go out and get some new photos of puffins. Obviously, if they can do it in a new way, or a new style or an inventive, creative way, brilliant. But the old styles are just as good and just as wanted. So we still want birds on sticks. It might just be that we want the best looking birds, or a really stunning stick, or a stunning scene like this wren, for example. This is essentially just a bird on a stick, but look at the way it's been done. Look at the breath, being backlit, coming out of the wren's mouth, and the beautiful bluebells in the foreground. Someone shooting into the sun, that kind of thing. It's people want to see something new. People want something that inspires them. So I don't say no to any of our photographers. If they can shoot in whatever style they want, they can do whatever they want. But I do try and steer them and say, this is, if we can do something in a bit of a different way, absolutely brilliant. Obviously, from the RSPB perspective, we absolutely value photography. It's heavily used in everything we do. We've got something called a photography kind of brand book. So this is a book that tells our staff, the image styles that we're using at the moment, where to use a certain photo, where not to use a certain photo, what kind of styles we want to see people using. Everybody can look at this, and everybody can kind of decide, and learn a bit more about how we want the photography to be used at the RSPB. And it gets used everywhere. So, anything from an envelope that drops through somebody's door to photography is used in the reception area at the headquarters in the lodge. There's new photography on the wall, changes regularly in the seasons and things like that. And when we used to have our big members weekends and AGM weekends live in person, we used to use photography all through that weekend on the big screen. And of course, we've still got the RSPB magazine. It's no longer called Birds magazine, but we've still got our flagship magazine. We've still got our membership magazine. The photo on the front is still incredibly important. The styles may have changed. The emphasis on, the types of photos may have changed, but the idea that a photo is important for that front of that magazine is still very important to us. And remember, this is not a magazine that's sold. It's not a magazine that sits on the shelf having to stand out amongst other magazines, but yet we still think the front cover is a very important thing. And photographers absolutely love having the front cover of the magazine. And this barn owl image was one of the front covers from a previous magazine that was probably our best ever kind of received image from a front cover. So I think off the back of that barn owl image being on the front cover of one of our magazines, I think over 1,000 members got in touch to try and order a print of this. So RSPB Images can sell prints and things like that to members of the public, and that's exactly what happened. We sold over 1,000 prints of this particular barn owl image for people's walls and things like that. So it just goes to show people, if you put a photo on the magazine cover that people fall in love with, people are inspired by, then it can be, it's a great thing. It's an important thing, and the photographers obviously absolutely love having their front cover, and they love also having their inside the magazine as well, their double page spreads. Not just birds either, obviously. It's over the years, RSPB Images and the RSPB in general have become a more of an all nature kind of organization. Not saying that the focus is away from birds and bird conservation, but talking about everything else in nature is important, and therefore the imagery of everything else is just as important as well. So the RSPB Images has welcomed a range of photographers that don't just focus on birds, but focus on insects, plants, fungi, all that kind of thing, as landscapes, that kind of thing as well. We've also got a whole range of commercial products as well. So RSPB Images feeds in and supplies all of the imagery for greetings cards, diaries, calendars, books, and other kind of like fun products like trading cards and games, board games and things like that. So the library is, it's important. It's important for me and my role. I absolutely love looking after the library, and I do all I can to inspire our photographers to keep contributing, because obviously the money these days in photography has gone a little bit. And so, it's harder now to become a professional wildlife photographer. It's harder to, maintain an income through wildlife photography. But I try my best to inspire our photographers to keep contributing, because there's outlets for their imagery here. They're lucky that they are a contributor to Europe's biggest conservation charity, and therefore their images. If you're a wildlife photographer and your images are with RSPB Images, you know that your imagery is going to be used over and over again. Whereas if you're a contributor to somewhere like Alamy, for example, or Getty Images, they're not a specialist nature library and they're not attached to a conservation organization. So, the chance of sales may be a decrease. So I like to think that, our photographers and they have a great relation. I have a great relationship with them, and they are, they love contributing to RSPB Images. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about some of the styles of photography that we look for at RSPB. There's all kinds of styles of photography, and we want our photographers to kind of contribute in all different ways. And I suppose the first thing to say is that we'll never ever kind of reject pictures that have such great commercial appeal like these. So your classic robin in the snow on a spade handle, or anything cute, anything heartwarming, anything that's familiar, that makes people, gives a sense of season, makes people fall in love with nature, makes people laugh, anything that makes people go, these sorts of images have their place. They're not everybody's cup of tea. Totally get that. They're maybe not pure wildlife photography. They're maybe not sort of scientific nature photography, but they're commercial. They look great on commercial products. They do well at engaging certain audiences. They make people smile, make people laugh, make people fall in love with nature. They've got great character to them. And we would never say, we've got some photographers that specialize in this sort of more commercial kind of imagery. But we also want almost the complete opposite. We want breathtaking, inspiring pictures of nature, nature doing what it does best, nature interacting with each other, sometimes quite raw, quite kind of powerful pictures of nature doing what it does, battling each other, displaying and things like that. So any kind of action, any kind of movement in our imagery as well, it's really important to get that kind of imagery into our library. We need imagery that goes through the seasons, and we need imagery that sums up the season as well. So anything that really says this is winter, or this is a mist, anything with, a misty morning in spring or something like that. A couple of grebes courting here on a misty spring lake. Anything with showing extreme weather as well. It's really important when people think about wildlife photography. Don't shy away from those bad weather days, the snow, the rain, that kind of thing, because that can really add something powerful to an image. Over the years, over recent months and over the recent year, we've been asking a lot of our photographers to think about drone imagery as well, aerial imagery. And this is a sort of a bigger part of kind of looking at species from a different angle. Can you photograph a common species in a different way? Can you get in the water with, frogs in a pond or a pike in a reed bed? Can you look at a species from a completely different angle and photograph it in a way that people have never seen it before? Again, making people go, wow, making people appreciate a species in a different way, a way they've never seen it before. So a lot of our photographers now are using remote cameras, camera traps, wide angle lenses, firing their cameras from a distance using their iPad or something like that to try and, capture a different angle, a different perspective on the species, and which is great for us because that's exactly what we want to show. We want to show every part of nature. We want to show it in different ways. We want our photographers to be creative as well and use creative techniques in their photography. So, for example, it's not just a normal kingfisher photo. They, use a slow shutter speed here to slow down the waterfall behind, or even in terms of their composition, in terms of the way they frame their photos, leaving a lot of blank space to one side, which is great for some things like magazine where you need some text to one side. Using a slow shutter speed to sort of freeze the movement of a bird. yeah, all this kind of stuff. All this kind of artistic kind of element of photography. We want some of our photographers to think artistically, think creatively, think outside the box as well. Um, we've got photographers who specialize in extreme kind of macro photography. Sorry if anybody doesn't like spiders, probably should have put some sort of warning up before this, but we want photographers to, we've got specialist macro, specialist underwater photographers. We've got photographers who can now photograph and do things with flash and very sensitively for our species at night time. So capturing, or dusk or dawn, capturing the nocturnal habits of species that you normally would not be able to see any other way. We've got landscape photographers, photographing stunning landscapes in the UK and abroad as well. So we've got photographers out there we've got some photographers don't do any wildlife at all. They just focus on the habitats, focus on the landscapes as well. And we've got photographers who also are willing to go abroad, and they contribute their international imagery to us as well. It's certainly not a large part of our library. We're not a big player on the world scene, I suppose, but we don't mind taking on imagery from excursions to other countries, because we are still out there online, and we could still be selling their imagery to international clients. And we're also asking our photographers to think about photographing people and photographing the relationship between people and nature, science, conservation issues, problems that our wildlife is facing, reintroductions of species, and people who are saving species as well. So there's a lot of emphasis now on that conservation, that storytelling, the kind of journalistic kind of photography as well. We want people to be thinking about that, contributing that as well. So that's the sort of first part of my talk over, a bit of a rundown of RSPB Images and the photographic area of RSPB. So the second part of this talk is a little bit more about myself and my own sort of journey into photography and the kind of things that I like doing. So I've always been into nature, as I said. I've done a bit of everything, a bit of bird watching, twitching, ringing birds. I've been working for the RSPB as a volunteer. And then I worked in our supporter services team in the wildlife inquiries team, answering wildlife questions, before getting my job as the picture researcher. And been at bird fair for many years and kind of traveled around looking for wildlife and things like that. So I'm always been interested in nature, literally, from the Attenborough, kind of watching the Attenborough programs as a kid. But it was in 2006, I went on holiday to Cape Town with my girlfriend, who's now become my wife, and we went up to Table Mountain, and I saw all these lizards running around, and she had a DSLR camera. I didn't. Asked her to borrow it, and it was from that moment on that I never gave it back to her, I don't think, for the rest of that holiday. And it was that moment, as soon as I got home, I thought I better buy a camera. But then there was 2 or 3 years where I only took a few photos with it every time we went on holiday, and that was it really. Sort of tokenistic photos, and it was soon becoming apparent I needed to keep taking photos more regularly. That was becoming a bit of a passion of mine. I already loved nature, wanted to take photos, but it didn't quite click with me that I could be taking photos out in the British countryside. I just didn't, I've always liked looking at wildlife, but I didn't think I could be doing it in the UK. So I began my journey into kind of British wildlife photography. It started pretty badly. I had no idea what I was doing. And this is a good example. This is the first ever picture of a kingfisher that I took. So everything is pretty much wrong with this photo. The bird's not facing the right way. I've clearly not got the right shutter speed because everything's blurred, overexposed, etc., etc. There's loads of different things wrong with this photo. But the point was, I think I was getting out. I was trying to take photos of British wildlife, and it's the journey, it's the journey that I've enjoyed, the journey to the point where you start getting photos of kingfishers that you are really happy with. Another great example is this deer photo. And most of you might look at that and go, where's the deer? But and I normally, when I'm doing these presentations in person, I have a little pointer where I can show you. But believe it or not, in the sort of middle area there is an outline of a fallow deer. taken at RSPB it's not a good photo at all. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't use very good field craft even, let alone know what I was doing with my camera. Fast forward, and I'm starting to get the kind of deer photos that I kind of, in my brain, I kind of wanted back in those days. Another great example, and to be fair, it's a hobby. It's a fast-moving bird, but once again, back in the day, had no idea what I was doing in terms of exposing the photo correctly, using a fast enough shutter speed to photograph, one of our fastest birds in the country. Everything about it wrong. But it's a learning experience, and I don't feel like I fast tracked myself in wildlife photography. I didn't get the best lens first of all. Didn't go and just walk out the door and get the best photos. It's taken years and years and years to be able to perfect it to the point where I'm getting a hobby photo that I'm happy with. It's in focus. It's exposed correctly. It's sharp, etc., etc. The background is even pleasing. Even with static subjects, I kind of used to struggle. This is a fly agaric, one of our most famous, I suppose, one of my most sought after kind of fungi in the UK. This wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't flying off. It wasn't running away from me. It was going to be there the whole day. I spent hours probably trying to photograph this fly agaric and still never managed to get a good photo of it, even though, I spent all day with it really. And it also just goes to show these photos I kept. I didn't keep them because I thought I was going to be doing a talk about my photography in years to come. I kept them because I genuinely thought these were very good photos at the time. And it's taken all of that kind of learning experience to then be able to get a photo of something that I'm happy with. Obviously, this is a more up-to-date fly agaric, and it's kind of shot in the style that I was kind of, that I'm pleased with, and that's the kind of journey that I've been on. When I think about wildlife photography, these things come into my mind the most. I don't just go for a walk normally and just hope to see something. I do kind of have a plan. And that's come a lot over the years when I've, with 2 kids now and a busy life and things like that. You might get 1 day a week to do some photography. I look at it and think, what do I need to go and photograph, or where should I go? And it falls under one of these 4 brackets. So, do I go somewhere where something is guaranteed? So it doesn't matter what it is; it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed that I'll get the subject, or well, it does matter what it is. So I suppose something like going to a deer park, going to Bushy Park, for example, there's deer there. They're guaranteed. They don't leave Bushy Park. So if you go, your subject is at least there. Or do I go somewhere where there are multiple subjects? So, for example, if I was in London, for example, do I go somewhere like Hyde Park or Regent's Park? There's going to be something there. There's going to be a coot, there's going to be a heron, there's going to be a grebe, there's going to be something to photograph. So if the light's good and I need to get out, do I just go somewhere where there's multiple subjects, and as long as I switched on, I'll be able to find one of them and get a good photo? Do I take a risk on something that may or may not be there, or may not show well? So that happened this morning, actually, out to try and photograph waxwings. I'll talk about waxwings later. Are they going to turn up? Are they going to land in the right spot? Et cetera, et cetera. Is the light going to be any good? All that kind of thing. You can obviously plan for certain things, but not everything. Or finally, do I go somewhere where the subjects I cannot get locally? So do I go for a bigger drive up to the Peak District for dippers, because we don't get them in Bedfordshire? Or, I don't know, do I go up to the Cairngorms to photograph mountain hares or something like that, because I can't photograph a mountain hare in Bedfordshire. So that's my sort of thinking when it comes to wildlife photography, and I generally plump for one of these options, and some of them obviously a bit more planned, but I generally have to think about these kind of options before I go out. I don't tend to just go, I'm just going to go for a walk here and see what happens. I go for lots of walks with my family and things like that anyway. With photography, I feel like I want to come back with some pictures on a memory card. So I kind of want to pick one of these options. In terms of my style, I absolutely love getting down low and eye level with my subjects. I think that's one of the most important things in wildlife photography. So no matter what your subject is, if it's a water vole, try and get as close to the water as possible. I love getting eye level with subjects. The best thing about getting eye level is it helps you to blur those foregrounds and backgrounds. And once you blur those, then you isolate your subject. I like the kind of mushy effect of a blurred foreground or a blurred background. So I do feel like getting eye level helps that. It just helps with the blurring, but obviously getting eye level as well kind of gives you a better connection to your species as well. And obviously with RSPB, my RSPB head in mind, it's really important for a species to connect with the audience, because you want that audience to recognize the species, fall in love with it, want to protect it, want to love it, that kind of thing. So whatever the subject, if you can get that kind of eye connection, so I always try and focus on the eye, always try and get the eye as the sharpest part of the photo. I don't mind if other parts of the photo aren't in focus, aren't clear. If the eye is in focus, that's one of my main priorities with photography. I really love using kind of great light. I don't mind, don't mind common subjects like this duckling, for example. If it's a common subject but it's got fantastic light, and obviously the sun's coming from behind this duckling with all its kind of like downy feathers kind of spiked up, that produces something really interesting. So the light is incredibly important in wildlife photography. I'd say if you can combine getting low or getting eye level with your subject and great light, they're the two most important things for me. I kind of really like shooting through little gaps in vegetation and little gaps to sort of frame my pictures with a kind of natural framing. So it's difficult to explain sometimes, but this is, for example, this bluebell photo. These bluebells were in a sort of small gap in amongst a whole load of other bluebells. So I kind of like shooting through a little gap. Same with this wasp spider here, shooting through a small gap in the heather to kind of blur everything and kind of naturally frame it. I think these photos probably explain that a bit more, but a lot of people, this is a very famous tawny owl in a tree in a park in Suffolk, and lots of people were photographing this tawny owl just with no kind of framing around it. So they were just, you could stand somewhere and just photograph it in the hole, for example. But I actually found a small gap in the autumnal leaves, and I preferred having that kind of natural framing, those kind of blurred blobs of color and light to kind of frame it. Same with this green woodpecker. This green woodpecker was nesting in Richmond Park, and there was an angle where you could just photograph it very normally. And I still do that photo. I still try and take that photo, especially if you've got a chance to, if someone keeps coming back or it's a regular thing, you can do that. But I kind of picked another area where I was shooting through a little hole in the leaves to try and get something a bit more interesting, and just, put some color, put some other shapes and things into the photo. Sometimes you can do it to the extreme. And that can kind of, you've got the eye contact there, you've got the shooting through the gap, but maybe this moorhen is a little bit too hidden. But I don't mind that as well. I don't mind it personally. It might not work for everybody, but I kind of like the idea of kind of, shooting through little gaps. Absolutely nothing wrong with the subject not being massive in the frame as well. So people talk about subjects being small in the frame or large in the frame. Another photographer may choose always to photograph the subject dead in the center of the picture, and full, very big in the picture as well. Absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that, to show off what wonderful species it is. But there's nothing wrong with shooting things small in the frame and showing some of the habitat that they live in, and putting the subject to one side as well. So, for example, this water vole, I thought it was good to put him onto the left-hand side of the picture, looking right into the negative space and sort of showing a bit more about where this water vole lives. This water vole lives in a kind of stone, area of a canal. Just thought it was important to sort of shoot in that kind of style. And the same with this otter as well, just showing the sort of river habitat that it lives in. Don't get me wrong, absolutely love getting close-ups of otters as well, but sometimes you can't, or sometimes you just think, let's try and shoot in a more interesting way. I do try and play around with other sort of techniques as well. They don't always work. But, for example, this is a dipper up in the Peak District. And this was putting my camera on a tripod and using a slow shutter speed to really freeze frame or, slow down the movement of the water, of the waterfall that this dipper is sitting on. But obviously that requires the dipper to stay as absolutely still as possible, which dippers don't do. They dip up and down quite regularly. But if you keep practicing, this bird kept returning to the same spot. So it's just a case of keep practicing until you and keep taking lots of shots until you get the right one. So yeah, same sort of technique here, using a slow shutter speed for these two deer that are chasing each other around, and then converting the photo into black and white as well to see whether that works better. And again, another slow shutter speed picture. This is a colony of wood ants. So here I'm looking down on the ants, and when you look down on a colony of wood ants, it's just a frenzy of movement. So using a slow shutter speed and trying to kind of play around with speeds and show the movement of these wood ants. And again, showing the movement of all of these knots. This is at the RSPB Snettisham, where you get big banks full of wading birds, most of them not, kind of moving around, and they're kind of circling, and they're almost like creating little waves of birds. And then obviously what I've done here is use a slow shutter speed to focus on them moving, but then I've focused on the one oyster catcher in amongst them to keep that one sharp. So don't mind going out in bad weather as well. I always think there's a good photo to be taken in bad weather. So going out in the rain to photograph a deer, and then converting the photo to black and white as well. I'm not a black and white photographer, but if a photo lends itself to being shot in black and white, then I'll definitely give that a go. So yeah, there's some of the sort of techniques and some of the things I look for. And, over the years, I've had a bit of nice kind of success with competitions and things like that. So my photography, it's always nice, great to be noticed and great to be recognized for your photography. And, it's a nice little happy kind of byproduct of going out and taking photos. So, in 2012, I won the Hearts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust calendar competition, which is a small competition, but something I was quite chuffed with this grey heron picture. And then over the years, I've been recognised in other competitions, such as the British Wildlife Photography Awards. This was a seasons category, so it was 4 pictures of cormorants taken over 4 different seasons. Bird Photographer of the Year. I got kind of like a runners-up for this urban kingfisher photo. So the sort of big round light behind that kingfisher is actually the light of a bus, and this was a kingfisher that was spending a lot of time in a town centre near me, and the buses would go past often, and there were blue buses as well, which created like a blue background, so it was really nice. That was recognised in the Bird Photographer of the Year Awards. And probably the most well-known photo of mine was this, which is the Happy Hedgehog. It was named not by me, but it won the 2015 Countryfile calendar competition. And yeah, they named it Happy Hedgehog. That was probably one of my most famous kind of well-known pictures that's kind of got quite a lot of attention over the years, and it's I'm happy to have been recognised in that competition, and it raised money for children in need and things like that. It was great, and it was filmed for Countryfile and met John Craven and everything, so it was really great. And I've also had a few kind of articles in BBC Wildlife magazine over the years as well. So I photographed the reintroduction of the checkered skipper butterfly into Northamptonshire, and there was a whole feature on that reintroduction. And I also had a feature on urban cormorants in London. So for a whole kind of year and a half, I became a bit overly fascinated by cormorants. Absolutely love them. Thought they were brilliant birds. Still think they're brilliant birds. And sort of went down to London as often as I could to photograph them in a variety of different kind of places, because, if you go along the River Thames, there's so many great places to photograph cormorants. So I was kind of like telling the story about their kind of movement from a sort of coastal seabird almost to like basically an inland bird nesting. And then obviously they nest at like Walthamstow wetlands. And so they nest right in the centre of London, basically, right into, and they inhabit most of the waterways of London now. So there's a photo, kind of 13 photos in BBC Wildlife magazine talking about their story as well. So, and it's that kind of human human bird relationship or urban wildlife relationship that I do sort of tend to gravitate towards. I do love pictures that tell a story between people and wildlife. So I'm just going to show you a few of those now. So this is a rook at Stonehenge, and I went to Stonehenge just to look at Stonehenge actually for the first ever time, but became totally fascinated by this woman who worked there, who had a great relationship with all the rooks and the jackdaws that live around Stonehenge. And in the end, like, some of the tourists were more interested in looking at what she was doing than the actual stones themselves. This is a pied wagtail roost. So you get a lot of urban pied wagtail roosts in the UK. And this was a pied wagtail roost at Heathrow Airport. Great place to photograph pied wagtails. Not so great because the security there don't like you photographing an airport. So, you have to be careful, or you have to chance it. And, I ended up getting told to leave after taking these photos. But an absolutely magical place to see 1,000 pied wagtails coming into the airport, to the few trees in the middle of the airport to kind of, and to get the people in the background coming, the comings and goings of people arriving into the UK, and then these wagtails every night using the airport as their home. I'll rope my son into a photo whenever I can. Out on holiday crabbing, I'll get him in his legs and his shorts in the background to photograph a crab. And sticking with the cormorant theme, I also photographed this one cormorant in a harbour in Portsmouth that was regularly fed by some guys who worked in the fishmongers. So anywhere where an animal is making an urban life for itself, nesting in an urban area or nesting in amongst people, spending time, around people, or, that bit of human connection. I think these pictures really, I really love these sorts of pictures. They're quite opportunistic sometimes. They're not the sort of, it's not going out into the countryside and photographing a field fair, a redwing or something like that. It's kind of there's these odd places you have to go to get these sorts of photos, but you do. So I live near Bedford, and the Bedford town centre has a resident family of otters. And they often spend time in the town centre. So absolutely love spending time with them, especially during the sort of post-lockdown years, late 2020, 2021. The otters were very, very showy in Bedford town centre. And this gives you a good idea of how sort of showy they are. You can just see the otter there coming out of the drainage hole. And those two people, I think, over the road or just above it, were looking for otters that day. And I'm not sure if they saw this one, but there's, the otters in Bedford town centre are absolutely brilliant for urban wildlife photography. I love photographing urban nests as well, or when birds have made a home in a kind of urban area. So a pair of spotted flycatchers here nesting in a church, in the wall of a church, or a grey wagtail nesting in a little hole under a road bridge. I do seek out these kind of urban nests. Missel thrush nesting in a traffic light. This was in Leicestershire. I heard about this one on the internet. Someone let me know, said, "Oh, I've seen this bird going into a nest in a traffic light. Are you interested?" So I raced up there and photographed it. But love sort of when birds are making their homes in human or urban areas. These sand martins were nesting under another sort of a railway bridge. You can see them here. There's the nest. There's the chicks popping their heads out, and there's the adult. And this is a great chance to get these sorts of photos with all the chicks sticking their heads out begging. Not quite the perfect photo. There was 4 chicks in there, and they would never, all 4 of them would never ever stick their heads out at the same time. So I only managed to get 3. So I'm not fully happy with that photo, but quite happy with it. I suppose if you could perfect it even more, you might get the adult sharp, but it's very difficult to get any of it sharp when you're trying to get this sort of shot under a gloomy railway bridge. And this is another great urban nest that I photographed, a nest of kestrels in an old industrial building as well. What a setting for a nest! Brilliant. So I'm going to end my talk now just on a few of my photo sort of projects. So when I find these urban birds or these urban nesting opportunities or these urban wildlife opportunities, some of them turn themselves into a bit of a kind of mental project of mine. I realise I haven't got loads and loads of time left, but I'll sort of zip through them quickly. So for a number of years, I kind of got a bit obsessed with foxes in cemeteries, all in London. And started in Brompton Cemetery with a particularly very friendly and well identifiable fox who had a lot of friends who used to like feeding him. And they all had different names for him. So throughout the day, lots of different people came and fed this fox. He had one little droopy ear, and he was very, very used to people. I'm sure any of you guys coming from London will be very used to foxes. But cemeteries, I always felt, were wonderful places to photograph foxes and humans kind of coming together. So I spent a bit of time at Brompton Cemetery doing these foxes, but the problem with these was every time it was springtime, the whole cemetery gets so overgrown. It's very hard to start seeing start losing the foxes come about May time. And I really did want to photograph fox cubs. So I relocated to the City of London Cemetery, just on the outskirts of London, in Ilford, and followed this vixen around for sort of a summertime and an autumn time. And she was absolutely lovely fox to spend time with. But the main aim was to come back in the spring the following year. Here she is with some food in her mouth, and that's what you wanted to spot. You wanted to spot her going back somewhere with some food in her mouth, because that meant she had a den. And that was my overall aim, was to find a family of foxes that had their young underneath one of the gravestones. And that's exactly what I found. And it's a great little photo story, I think, telling about the lives about these animals, spending time living in amongst the graves, living amongst people, living and dead, and following their story. And with a lot of these stories, if there's some sort of seasonal element to it, I will keep going back in the seasons to try and perfect those shots. So photographing in the spring and the summer, and then going back in the autumn to try and photograph the fox in autumn colours. And about a year ago, the sort of dream happened, which was it snowed in London, or on the outskirts of London, which it doesn't do that often. And we actually had snow at the cemetery as well, so could not resist going back there. And sort of almost completing the sort of seasonal project with photographing the foxes in all 4 seasons. Starlings have always become a bit of an obsession with mine. I absolutely love starlings and where they live. Piers are great. Brighton Pier, for example, this one, absolutely brilliant to, stand on the pier, photograph the starlings swirling around the pier with people, and photographing them out at sea, as well as they swirl over the sea and swirl around the old pier and things like that. But one of the better piers is Aberystwyth Pier. It's one of my favourite piers to photograph starlings on. So the good thing about Aberystwyth is you can go to the end of the pier, have a beer, and photograph the starlings, as they come and kind of interact with you. And then in the evening, you can get the big swirling mass of starlings around the pier. And the great thing about Aberystwyth compared to, say, Brighton Pier is that the starlings roost underneath the pier of the evening, and you've got access to underneath the pier. So you can, this, for example, is taken at street level, then you can get down to beach level, and you can photograph them going under the pier. And then you can actually get the interaction of the birds right underneath the pier as they go to sleep at night. And it's, so you don't, it's kind of, you can photograph the starling murmuration above and below, which is quite rare. Starling murmurations often end once they've gone into the reed beds or something like that. But with a pier location, especially with Aberystwyth, you can photograph them, all the way until basically, well, you can keep photographing them even using the lights of Aberystwyth itself. So absolutely love starlings. Another great place where starlings hang out is supermarket car parks. So for a while, I became a bit obsessed with photographing starlings in a supermarket car park. And these starlings in particular in Milton Keynes absolutely loved hanging around the trolleys, which I thought made really great photos. The sort of the steel and the kind of shiny silver lines of a supermarket trolley. They'd sit in the trolleys, around them, underneath them, on top of them, and they'd sing as well. Sing from on top of the trolleys as well, and all that sort of thing. So there's some loads of great opportunities in this car park. They'd often come down to the puddles on the car park floor for a drink as well. And then I could explore different techniques using a wide angle lens and pressing a trigger and triggering it from a bit of a distance. Yeah, great. And I also went to Camden Market as well, which is another great styling location. I'm sure some of you guys have been to Camden Market before. Great styling location. They're really tame. Love hanging around people. Sit up in the trees, especially when there's Christmas lights in around Camden as well. You get the blobs of Christmas light that you can use as well. So, spent a few times going down to Camden for those. And then even in my own garden, I've managed to photograph the starlings that are nesting in and around my house. Even to the point of there's a cottage down the road from me, like a bungalow. And I knocked on their door and asked if I could set up a step ladder, just so I could get eye level with the starlings that were nesting in their guts under their roof tiles. And they luckily said yes to me. So I managed to get some nice pictures of starlings nesting in a kind of house environment as well, and then feeding their young in the garden. I also spent some time with the kittiwakes that live and breed in Newcastle city centre. And then again, a fantastic urban opportunity to photograph, what essentially is a seabird that's made its home right in the centre of Newcastle. And there's loads of places. I spent just a weekend photographing these birds, but there's loads of places you can go and see the kittiwakes nesting in Newcastle. Loads of different locations on the bridge, on the old flour mill, which now is like a gallery. On various other roofs and buildings and things like that. And there's loads of photographic opportunities. Great places to see them nesting, but also to tell their story about they've moved inland. Doesn't come without their problems. You can find dead birds and smashed eggs on the pavement, unfortunately, as well. But yeah, great opportunity. And the other thing about a city centre location is the light. You get some fantastic light first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, but you also get light at night time as well. So here's a picture of me sort of behind the scenes, I suppose, on one of the bridges at night. This is 9-10 o'clock at night. You've got stag parties, hen parties buzzing around on the streets below. And I'm still out trying to photograph these birds with a little kind of small LED light just to light them up softly. Doesn't scare the birds, doesn't do anything to them, but just trying to show them, show how they're still awake. They're still feeding their young. The adults are going back and forth using the lights of the city. They're still active, and still feeding their young, even in the sort of twilight hours and things like that. They very rarely are asleep in the city centre location. And the final sort of project, which is a bit sort of half done at the moment, but is roe deer in another cemetery. So I do spend quite a lot of time in cemeteries in the end, but it's not a morbid place. These cemeteries are beautiful, wonderful places and for wildlife. And there's one particular cemetery on the outskirts of London that's brilliant for seeing and photographing roe deer. So this is a bit of an ongoing project because I'm trying to sort of tell their story through the seasons, and I haven't managed to photograph them in all the seasons yet. Had some nice autumnal colours in the cemetery, so I photographed them in the autumn, which is the colours look lovely in the autumn time, and then I photographed them sort of as winter arrives. So some frosty kind of conditions, and you get the beautiful velvety antlers on the roe deer's head. So lovely frosty conditions. But I've not managed to photograph them in snow yet. So that's what I'm praying and hoping for this winter. And although I have been there in the summertime when the males look absolutely stunning, there's lush greens and all the ferns around and everything like that, and the does are chewing the leaves. I've not managed to photograph some with young yet either. This is my best attempt. You can just about see the heads of two baby roe deer behind this female, but that was a pretty poor attempt at photographing a roe deer with her young. So that's the future. That's hopefully the snow and then the babies this year. Yeah. So I'm just going to finish now before on just some recent photos of waxwings. No real reason for it other than they're just taking up a lot of my time at the moment. You might guess I'm a bit of a perfectionist sometimes with my photography, and with the waxwing invasion we're having this year, I've become a bit obsessed with the perfect waxwing photo. So this is the first waxwing photo I took this year of just a bird near where I live. Nothing special about it at all. But very lovely bird. Love waxwings. Love spending time with them. And I moved to another location. I've been to about 6 or 7 waxwing locations so far this winter, trying to find that perfect photo. And although these photos are lovely, and I love the berries and things like that, I'm aiming for a certain waxwing photo. It's a bird on some dangling berries with a berry in its mouth. Beautiful light, nice background and things like that. So this location sort of was coming together a little bit, quite nice, but there's some problems with this photo here. The waxwing hasn't got its crest up in the air, which you really want. The berries aren't dangly enough for my liking. So, back to the drawing board, move to another location. This location was brilliant, a car park in Peterborough, all the classy locations for waxwings. Quite like these berries, although I'm not a massive fan of the red berries for some reason. Prefer photographing waxwings with orange or white or pink berries. So I had to make do with some red berries, but brilliant, nice, clean backgrounds. Waxwings have got their crests up. Really nice, easy to photograph waxwings. So I started to like this location. You've got some dangly berries there a little bit, but it's not the perfect waxwing location. It's nice, it's okay. And it even had some nice urban lights behind it as well. So you've got those blobs of urban lights, but yeah, not perfect. I didn't really like the berries. So I moved to another location. This location has lovely, this is an industrial estate in Stevenage, another classy location. This location did have some nice pinky white kind of berries, as you can see here, which I definitely think these are the best berries that you can photograph a waxwing with. And you can get some really lovely kind of pictures, but still couldn't quite manage what I was after in terms of there's so many berries here. So my most recent attempts are this one, which I think is definitely getting on the right track. The big clump of dangly berries. Hasn't got the berry in its mouth, unfortunately. I might have that shot. Need to go back through them, but yeah, getting there slowly. I would have preferred it if these were the pink berries, but the orange ones are good. And the good thing about spending a time with one subject, which is pretty much all I've done for the last few weeks to spend time with waxwings, is you get to see lots of things. And seeing these two waxwings passing a berry between each other's mouths in a sort of act of courtship, which is probably something you don't get to see that often, and probably something that mainly happens back in there where they breed. It was lovely to see. So I'm going to persist with waxwings for the next sort of month or two, hopefully, and perfect those shots before spring arrives and I move on. That's it from me. I really appreciate you listening.